Hi everyone, I'm Nishtha. I'm a research affiliate at the Center for Personalised Medicine and a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Human Genetics here at Oxford. Today, I will present a few findings from a qualitative study I conducted to explore how healthcare professionals understand and navigate ethnicity in genomic medicine. And I will then share insights from an interactive workshop we organized with the support of the Center for Personalised Medicine, which brought together BPI groups, patient representatives, healthcare professionals, and researchers to reflect on issues related to ethnicity recording in healthcare. So what is the relevance of this concept in genomic medicine and in wider healthcare? Ethnicity information is routinely recorded across the NHS as part of broader efforts to document diversity, monitor who is accessing services, and address health inequalities. In genomic medicine, it is additionally used as a proxy for biological ancestry to support the interpretation of genetic findings. But ethnicity, as is widely recognized within social science scholarship, is a socially constructed way of grouping people based on shared aspects of identity. These shared aspects could be cultural traditions, language, religion, ancestral origin, and sometimes even nationality or regional background. People might describe their ethnicity differently depending on where they are, who is asking the question, and what feels most comfortable. What is important to understand in the context of healthcare is that ethnicity is not a biological category. It reflects how people understand themselves and are recognized by others within particular social and historical settings. So the two purposes of recording ethnicity, population-level equity monitoring and clinical use in genomic interpretation, rest on different assumptions of what ethnicity represents and how it should function. To understand this tension in greater detail and how ethnicity is interpreted and used in everyday clinical work, I interviewed healthcare professionals involved in genomic medicine, including clinical geneticists, genetic counselors, lab scientists, and nursing teams. The interviews were conducted over a 10-month period between 2024 and 2025, and I will share some of the findings from these interviews here. Across the interviews, healthcare professionals often described a mismatch between the complexity of patients' backgrounds and the ethnicity categories available on NHS forms. Patients, particularly those with diverse backgrounds, would often share detailed family histories spanning multiple generations, but there was no meaningful way to record that information. Healthcare professionals also felt that categories such as Black British or Asian homogenized vastly different population groups and were too broad to offer genetically relevant insights into one's ancestry. This difficulty was compounded by the fact that current ethnicity categories do not reflect global migration patterns and multicultural families. So too many patients ended up being classified as other or mixed. So ethnicity recording often became an exercise in reducing complex identities into categories that were poorly aligned with both genomic needs and patients' self-identified backgrounds. Another important finding was the emotional labor involved in these conversations. Many healthcare professionals described asking about ethnicity as a sensitive and sometimes uncomfortable part of their role. They worried about causing offense or being misunderstood, particularly when working with patients who may have experienced discrimination or mistrust of institutions. And they feared that patients might react negatively to being questioned about their ethnicity. And in such situations, ethnicity was often not recorded at all or was recorded to a limited degree. Healthcare professionals often felt they were walking a tightrope, carefully calibrating how they approached these conversations, anticipating patients' reactions, and actively mitigating any discomfort. And yet, much of this ethical and emotional work remains largely invisible and unsupported within current training and healthcare systems. Another thing that stood out was that many healthcare professionals had very little idea regarding what happened to ethnicity data once they recorded it. They described the laboratory pathway as a bit of a black box. They didn't know how ethnicity information was being used in labs, whether the information they entered in free text was helpful at all, or how missing data affected variant interpretation. As a result, they questioned whether the time and effort invested in collecting ethnicity information was actually making a difference. They also highlighted how the mainstreaming of genomics has further contributed to inconsistencies in ethnicity recording. As genetic testing is increasingly being requested by clinicians outside specialist genetic services, uncertainty about why ethnicity information is collected and how it is used has become more pronounced, leading to greater variation in recording practices. Building on these and other findings from the interviews and to explore these issues further, we convened a workshop here at St. Anne's College in June 2025, supported by the Center for Personalised Medicine. The workshop brought together members of patient and public involvement and engagement groups, representatives of patient support organizations, researchers, healthcare professionals, and laboratory scientists. It was designed to understand patients' perspectives on ethnicity recording and the challenges of capturing complex identities through predefined boxes. We designed the workshop as a series of interactive activities to explore how people experience ethnicity categories in healthcare. So we started off with a button exercise where participants chose a button representing an aspect of their identity and reflected on its significance. And this opened early conversations around self-perception and diversity. Participants then took part in a cube activity where they wrote down labels they had encountered in healthcare, how those labels made them feel, and what was missing from such labels. These cubes captured a wide range of lived experiences, being stereotyped, mislabeled, dismissed, or boxed into inaccurate categories. Participants also reflected on the double-edged nature of labels. They can create recognition and connection, but they can just as easily exclude and cause harm. So working in groups, participants then discussed a real-world healthcare scenario, which we provided them, raising questions about the ethics of categorization, whether ethnicity should be chosen from a list or written in freely, and how political sensitivities, confidentiality, and consent can be properly addressed. Participants also considered the implications of categories whose meanings shift between geographical regions and the broader challenge of respecting identity narratives in healthcare and research. Throughout the day, participants were invited to jot down their reflections on postcards, and what emerged was a growing appreciation of just how complex ethnicity really is. Participants reflected on how things like ancestry, culture, religion, language, skin color, gender, and even where we live can all shape how we see ourselves and how others see us. Many spoke about their own assumptions and biases and how identity can sometimes be a source of pride, but in other situations, something people may be reluctant to disclose. In the second session of the workshop, participants developed questions based on earlier discussions, considering different target audiences such as researchers, clinicians, or policymakers. These what next questions formed the bridge into the evening panel, where scientists, healthcare professionals, and policy experts joined the participants for an open conversation and a two-way dialogue. One of the recurring themes was the challenge of balancing the need for standardized data with the reality that identities are often fluid and context-dependent. The discussion repeatedly turned to the importance of trust, clear explanations, and understanding why ethnicity information is being collected in the first place. Panelists also emphasized the value of working with communities to design these systems, supporting healthcare professionals to have these conversations appropriately, and being transparent about how ethnicity data is ultimately used. Bringing together both the interviews and the workshop discussions, three key messages stand out. First, there is a tension at the heart of ethnicity data collection. The same category is expected to support very different goals, from monitoring inequalities to informing genomic interpretation. Second, current categories often fail to capture the complexity of people's identities, family histories, and lived experiences, leaving both healthcare professionals and patients frustrated by their limitations. And finally, trust matters. People want to understand why ethnicity information is being collected, how it will be used, and who will benefit from such information. Taken together, these findings suggest that challenges surrounding ethnicity recording are not simply technical or administrative. They reflect deeper conceptual, ethical, and relational questions about what information is being collected and why. Addressing these challenges will require greater clarity about the different purposes ethnicity data is expected to serve, alongside more transparent systems, better support for healthcare professionals, and meaningful engagement with the communities whose identities these categories seek to represent. Thank you.